Hey, this is Chris and I'm here with my Cosplay 600 3D printer that's still under construction. Today I'm going to show you what it took to turn two 2040 aluminum extrusions into two 4040 extrusions. This video covers a lot of the tools and the materials that I use to work on aluminum extrusions at home. So if you're interested in some basic metalworking or what's going into my Cosplay 600 custom 3D printer, this video is for you. Welcome to Kersey Fabrications. Here I am in my basement that I'm currently under construction. Sorry for the crappy sound and possibly poor lighting down here. But I'm going to be chopping down these 80 millimeter 2040 extrusions into 70 millimeter extrusions. I've got my chop saw here. I've got a special non-ferrous blade attached to it. I'm going to show you how this is done. Should be fairly quick, and this is the next step that I need to do before I can continue the work on my Cosplay 600 printer. Let's see how this goes. So with the chop saw, as I mentioned, I've got a special blade for non-ferrous metals. So this will cut the aluminum without any problems. And what I need to do is, this is a 70 millimeter extrusion. These are 80 millimeter extrusions, which I ordered. At the time I thought I was going to need 80. I don't anymore. So I need to cut these down to 70s. So I'm going to use the 70 that I have as the reference guide. I'm also going to measure to make sure, but let's get these cut down. So first things first, when dealing with any saw like this, what we want to do is make sure we've got safety cover. So I've got these fully enclosed goggles because we're dealing with shards of metal. Don't want those in my eyes. I'm going to put these on first. Okay, next up, when dealing with metal, you should always use the lubrication. So this is a special saw blade lubricant. I can include links to these in the description. So the way this works is I'm going to simply get the edge of the blade dipped in this. I'll show you how this works. And that's all that's needed to get the blade lubricated for cutting metal. Next up, the actual cutting. So let's, again, this is one of my 80s. This is a 70. Then get it all lined up. Check out our blade. One thing I've learned is these blades actually have just a little bit of flare out to them, so never cut right up to your line. Give yourself probably about a millimeter, maybe 2 of extra space, and it should cut a perfect line. Again, let me get this on here. We have it in place. I'm going to remove this one. And use my clamp here to make sure everything is rigid. To double check, I'm going to take my tape measure. Make sure we're right at 70. And that looks pretty good. If I need to cut it down just a hair, I can still shave this. So let's get this cut. Now when doing this, make sure you do not force the saw. Give it time to cut. Let's check how we did. I can compare it to not only the tape measure, but also my other piece of metal. I like to double check that. But to me, that is perfect at 70. Let's do the next one. Again, if you're using a reference beam, always use the original reference. Don't use one of the cut ones as a new reference. That will cause you problems. And we'll line these up. Yeah, I would say that that's maybe a millimeter or less over. So let's move it down just a touch. We'll shave it, because you can do that with this blade without too many problems. So let's shave this down a little bit more. Okay, take a look. All right, I'm happy with that. Now we should have 4 of these the same length. All right, for the next step in this process, we are at the drill press, and we're going to take these 20 by 40 extrusions and turn them into 40 by 40 extrusions by screwing them together. So I've got, I guess I've got 8 M3 by 30 screws. Those need to go into these extrusions, but first we need to drill the holes. So what I've done here is I've created this jig that I've clamped to the drill press. Will actually perfectly center the drill press onto the center of the extrusions, so that when I screw, they'll be centered in the actual the rails. So I'm going to show you how this works. I've got a 2.5 millimeter bit that I'm going to use to drill the holes, and then I'm going to come in on one extrusion with an M3 bit that will actually make one hole bigger, and then on the other extrusion I'm going to come in with an M3 tap, and that will allow me to make that the nut portion of the screw so that I can tighten these together. So let's see how that's done. So as you can see, I've got my 2 20 by 40 extrusions on top of each other. I push them up against this 2x4, which I have mounted to the drill press. At this point in the video, I'd like to pause for a second and mention I really should have taken the 2 extrusions and clamped them together here to make sure that the ends lined up. Otherwise, what I ended up having to do later after this video was shot was saw off a little bit of each end of this extrusion set because they weren't lined up correctly. I fixed this when I did the second set, and you'll notice I clamped them together at the beginning, but it was a problem I have here. Ultimately, it cost me about 4 millimeters on each extrusion, but I wanted to let you know that at this point so that you don't make the same mistake. Now I'm going to want these screws, I'm going to do 1 in each rail, 20 millimeters from the end, from each end. I think that'll create a really good joint. So I'm going to get this centered on 20 millimeters. See if that looks about right. Now that I'm at 20 millimeters, I'm going to hold it in place. And then I want to actually clamp this to my drill press rather than having the chance that it's going to try to shift on me while I'm drilling. So I've got my pressure clamp. Have that clamped in place. I don't think I need to clamp both ends. As I said before, safety first. We're going to put on our goggles. We're dealing with metal shavings here. So this is my 2.5 millimeter bit. All right, let's run this down. Oh, what I've forgotten. That's a tap. Make sure this is good and lubricated. Put a few drops in there, and that should run all the way down. That protects our bit as well as make sure that it's a nice cut. And one more. All right. So that should be cut in the right place. Flip it around. Do the same thing, but on the other side. I'm really being very careful to make sure I don't let these 2 pieces separate. In fact, I think I'm going to use one of my clamps to actually hold them together at this point. Should have done that to begin with. Now they're holding together. I have another clamp I can use to clamp it down. Again, figure out 20 millimeters. Make sure we're right at it so that these 2 screws are parallel to one another. We're going to get another clamp. Clamp this to the bed. And as before, we'll double check our measurements one more time. That's pretty spot on. this, otherwise I'll break the bit even with the lubricant. Alright. Now let's do this a handful more times and we'll be ready to do the next step. Alright, so all 4 of these have been done. I them up the best I could. So now, like I said, one of these will become the nut rail and one of them will become a through-hole rail. So, let's show you how that's done after I do the other 2. Alright, so that's it for all the 2.5mm holes. We're going to switch over to the 3mm. Put 2 of these out. Put these over here as the ones that we're going to thread. And put these 2 over here as the one we're going to put 3mm holes in for the screws. Let's take out our 2.5mm bit. There it goes. Put in our 3mm bit. And all we're going to be doing is this is going to just be making a larger hole where we've already done our center. And the reason we did the 2.5mm first was so that we could center these together. So let's take these. I'm going to eye this one. And there should hopefully already be some oil on here. Let's gonna add a little extra in case. Make sure when you're doing this you leave your some plastic on one side, otherwise you're really going to scratch up your And now we are going to take our hand drill, which has our 3mm M3 tap on it, and do the same thing to the other ones, but just manually. And all of these look like they have the stuff still on it. I'm going to take a little bit and just put it directly on my bit. We can hand drill these. Make sure we're going forward. And we can see that it's coming out the other side. We'll reverse it. Going fast to clean up that thread. Okay. If all went to plan, we should be able to take one of our M3 screws and thread it into these. And they should just go. See there? So now these will be a nice fastener end to this to make sure that we have a nice tight fit. Just a few more and we'll be done. Again, when you're pulling back out on these, make sure that you do not pull. Let the drill do the work. Otherwise you could rip your threads out. And that will ruin your day. And there we go. So all these should fit together, and we will find out the rest of that in our live stream. And the final thing I'm going to work on today before the live stream is these M6 nuts that I'm going to actually have holding up these rails. I actually need to put on one end of each of these, I need to thread them for M6 nuts, or excuse me, M6 screws. So same procedure as last time. We are going to switch out for an M6 tap. And I'm having to do M6 just because of these particular extrusions. Extrusions come in different sizes, so sometimes these may be M5, sometimes they may be M6, but that's what these are. I can double check that the tip of this actually fits in here, and we're going to actually hope that that's good enough. Let's find out. Do one at a time. Back it out, get rid of some of this waste. Okay. There we go. That one should be tapped for an M6. Now re-oil ourselves up for these because these are long. Let's do another one. Again, don't force it. Let the drill do the work. If you end up with too much of the metal, don't be afraid to back out carefully. Pull it off. Start it again. So once I've got these strapped together, which I just did because I need to make sure that they're aligned to the right ends, then I can come in here and actually do the other side. I need to make sure I'm tapping the same ends. And the more lubrication you get in here, the easier this goes. So, particularly on a long bore like this, make sure you don't skimp. The threads will be nicer, and your drill will be happier. There you go. And those ends are tapped. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is I've got these brackets that are going to be used to hold up the uprights. And since I just went with M6, these are designed for M5 screws. I need to change these to M6 holes. I'm actually going to use an M6.5 drill bit, so that I've got a little bit of wiggle room in case they're not perfectly square. I don't want to have any problems. So. And just for reference, I wanted to show you, I used this piece of wood here to protect the finish of the black pieces, because I am trying to keep these as nice as possible. And in case you didn't see, I couldn't get a clamp on this one, so I made it where if it got loose, it would hit this clamp over here. So that's a tip, that if your clamp won't go, just make sure you get a clamp to stop it. Here are the final products from that video. These uprights were assembled with 4 M3 30mm screws and were designed to be more rigid than 2040 extrusions used on typical printers. I have 2 live streams already available on my channel about the creation of this printer and one more on the way. If you're curious about any of the tools or materials used in this video, I will include some links in the description. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Remember to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel. Thanks everybody.